Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to a new deep dive where we take your sources, the articles, the research, the notes you've shared, and help you pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight.
Think of us as your guides, really. Navigating through potentially dense material to find those surprising facts and core understandings that make you feel, well, truly well informed.
And today, we are plunging into something ancient, epic, and I think profoundly relevant excerpts from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita.
Hmm.
We're working specifically from an edition edited by Ashok Kaushik, published by Star Publications back in 1993.
Yeah, and this isn't just, religious scripture for many. It's often seen as a guide to navigating life's toughest choices. And it's all presented within this incredibly dramatic framework of a warrior's ultimate crisis.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is to journey through those initial chapters, understand the central dilemma that really sets everything in motion, and then uncover the surprising, powerful wisdom offered right from the start.
Get ready for some significant aha moments, hopefully.
Okay, so chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, it throws us headfirst into this really dramatic setting. We are on the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
Yeah, try to imagine the sheer scale of it. Two colossal armies arrayed against each other, ready for total war. The tension must have been just unbearable.
Absolutely. It's the climax, really, of years of conflict, bringing together the most powerful warriors of the age. The text lists a lot of names.
Mm.
The core setup is these two branches of one family locked in this terrible conflict.
Exactly. You've got the Kuru side led by Duryodhana with these mighty generals like Bhisma and Drona, veterans.
And facing them are the Pandavas, nominally led by Yudhishthira, but their star warrior, the key player really, is Arjuna.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Arjuna is in his chariot, right? Driven by Krishna himself, who was acting as his charioteer, positioned directly between these two massive armies.
Wow.
And he looks out and he sees, well, not just enemies, but his own grandfathers, his teachers, uncles, sons, grandsons, friends, basically his entire extended family and his most revered mentors, all ready to fight against him.
That immediate, stark confrontation, seeing his own kin, it triggers something incredibly profound in him. His reaction is just overwhelming grief. It almost paralyzes him.
Yeah, the text says he explicitly states he doesn't want victory or kingdom or any kind of pleasure if the cost is killing his own people.
He's not just emotional, though, is he? He actually offers these reasoned, tradition-based arguments against fighting.
Right. He points out that the very people they're fighting for the kingdom, the power of those people are right there on the other side, risking their lives.
He sees killing them as well, a great sin. He's very clear on that.
And he predicts these catastrophic social consequences, too. The breakdown of family traditions, what the text calls kula dharma. He worries about corruption, the mixing of social orders, or varna sankara.
Which he argues will even sort of damn their ancestors because the traditional offerings won't be made properly.
It's a complete unraveling of the social and spiritual order as he sees it. His despair is total. He says it would be better to be killed unarmed than to win a kingdom this way.
And the image the text gives is so powerful. He just sinks down in his chariot, completely agitated by grief, and throws aside his bow and arrows.
Yeah.
Done. Incapacitated by this moral and emotional crisis.
So there he is, the great hero Arjuna, on the brink of this massive battle, completely undone, dropped his weapons, paralyzed. That's the setup.
And then the wisdom starts to flow, delivered by Krishna.
Krishna's first response in chapter 2 is, well, it's quite direct, almost challenging Arjuna's despair.
He doesn't immediately console him, does he?
No, not really. He calls it unmanliness, paltry faint-heartedness. He asks why this infatuation has come upon him at such a crucial time, this odd hour. He basically tells him to stand up and fight.
But Arjuna's still stuck. He pushes back, right?
Yeah.
He asks, how can I possibly attack these revered men, Bhisma, Drona? He says he'd rather live by begging than enjoy pleasures stained with the blood of his own teachers.
He's genuinely torn. It's not just cowardice, it's a deep ethical dilemma. He's grappling with duty, family, morality, the consequences. He's utterly confused about the right path.
And this is where Krishna introduces the first, really foundational insight. He shifts the whole perspective, doesn't he? He talks about the nature of the soul.
Exactly. This is where I think the aha moment really starts for many readers. Krishna explains that the wise, they don't grieve. Not for the living, not for the dead.
Why not?
Because, he says, the reality of existence is fundamentally different from how Arjuna is seeing it. There was never a time that Arjuna or Krishna or any of these kings didn't exist. and there will never be a time when they cease to exist.
Okay, that's a big statement. How does he explain that?
He uses this powerful analogy. Just like the soul lives in a body that goes through childhood, youth, old age, eventually it just passes into another body. The whys aren't diluted by this change. It's like changing clothes.
So the core idea, the real insight, is that the soul, the true self, the Atman, is eternal.
Imperishable.
Precisely. Indestructible. It's never born. It never dies.
Right.
Weapons can't cut it. Fire can't burn it. Water can't wet it. Wind can't dry it. It's ancient, constant, everlasting.
It dwells in all bodies, but it can never actually be slain. Right.
Wow. Okay. So just pausing there for a second. If your fundamental nature, the core of who you are, is this eternal, indestructible soul, well, how does that instantly reframe Arjuna's crisis about killing?
It completely changes the stakes, doesn't it?
Yeah. And maybe more relevantly for us listening, how might that kind of understanding change your perspective on things like loss or fear or even, your own identity beyond just your physical body and your life experiences?
It shifts the entire ground of reality. And building on this profound truth about the soul, Krishna then brings it back to Arjuna's specific situation. He presents the argument for action based on duty, or dharma.
Right, his duty as a warrior, a kshatriya. The text says for a warrior, there's no greater good than a righteous fight.
And Krishna warns him, if you abandon this duty, you'll not only lose your honor, your dharma, but you'll incur infamy. And infamy, for a warrior, is considered worse than death.
Other warriors will despise him. His enemies will mock his cowardice. It's a grim picture.
And the outcomes are laid out very starkly. Fight. If you die, you go to heaven. If you conquer, you enjoy the earth. From this specific duty-bound perspective, it's presented as a kind of win-win.
But then there's a really crucial refinement, isn't there? He introduces this idea of equanimity, acting with inner balance.
Yes, exactly. Verse 38. The instruction isn't just fight. It's treat gain and loss, victory and defeat, pleasure and pain all alike, and then fight.
So it's the mindset behind the action.
That's the key. Acting with that mindset means you avoid incurring sin. It's not just what you do, but the inner state, the attitude with which you do it.
And this leads into the whole practice of karma yoga, right? The path of selfless action.
Precisely. Krishna says, okay, what I've told you so far relates to knowledge, to Sankhya. Now learn about the practice of action, yoga.
And there's that really powerful verse 40, isn't there? About how in this path, no effort is ever lost. There's no negative consequence just for trying. Even a tiny bit of this practice can save you from the great fear, the fear of birth and death.
That's a huge promise, isn't it? It makes the path accessible. Even small steps matter.
So what's the core instruction for this karma yoga?
Perform your duties, but renounce your attachment to the results. Stay even-tempered whether you succeed or fail. That state of inner balance, that equanimity, is yoga.
Okay, so action done purely for the fruit, for what you get out of it, that's seen as inferior to this yoga of equanimity.
Yes. Verse 49 makes that clear. And then verse 50 gives that beautiful definition. Strive for this yoga, because skill in action is this yoga.
It's not about achieving some perfect external outcome necessarily, but about mastering your inner state while you act.
Exactly. Which naturally leads Arjuna to ask, okay, what does a person like that actually look like? This person with a stable mind, this sthita prajna, what are their characteristics?
And Krishna describes them, right? Someone who has dismissed all cravings, who is satisfied just within the self.
They have control over their senses. He uses that famous image withdrawing the senses from sense objects, like a tortoise pulling its limbs into its shell.
That gives such a clear picture. A stable mind comes when the senses are fully under control.
And the text gives a really stark warning about not having that control. Dwelling on sense objects leads to attachment.
Which leads to desire, then anger, then delusion, loss of memory, ruin of intellect.
And ultimately, complete destruction. It lays out this clear, almost inevitable chain reaction if the senses run wild.
But the person who is self-controlled, who acts free from those likes and dislikes rooted in attachment, they gain this placidity, this calmness of mind.
Right. And that placidity ends sorrows and establishes their intellect firmly in the divine. Conversely, an uncontrolled mind is like a ship blown off course by the wind. It just carries away your discrimination, your ability to see clearly.
Full restraint of the senses leads to that stable mind.
And then there's that fascinating perspective flip in verse 69. It says, what seems like daytime to ordinary people chasing worldly happiness, that's like night to the yogi who's awakened divine knowledge.
And what seems like night to others, detachment, inner focus, that's daytime for the yogi. It really highlights a completely different set of values, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It underlines that true peace, true happiness, comes from inner mastery, not from chasing external things or indulging the senses without control. As verse 71 says, if your mind and senses aren't controlled, you lack reason and you lack peace.
Okay, so building on this foundation, the eternal self, duty, selfless action, mind control, the next few chapters, 3 through 8 in these excerpts, they seem to dig deeper into the mechanics and implications. A key point that keeps coming up is the necessity of action itself.
Yeah, the text is really clear on this. You can't achieve freedom from action or freedom from its results just by, sitting down and doing nothing externally.
Yeah.
Chapter 3, verse 4 says that plainly.
Because our very nature compels us to act.
Exactly. The modes of material nature, the gunas, they ensure that no one can remain truly inactive, not even for a moment. So, given that action is inevitable, performing your prescribed duty is seen as superior to inaction.
But it's not just doing action, is it? It's about the why and the how. Performing action with a higher purpose, like a sacrifice.
Precisely. Chapter 3, verse 9. Actions performed just for personal gain, they bind you. But action performed for yajna, for sacrifice, is liberating.
And it gives that practical example about food, doesn't it? Eating food cooked only for yourself is like eating sin, but eating the leftovers after an offering, that frees you.
Yes, and that connects to this powerful description of the interconnectedness of everything, this cycle of sacrifice. Beings come from food.
Food from rain. Rain from sacrifice. Sacrifice from prescribed action.
Action from the Vedas from God.
And the key insight, God is ever present in this whole cycle of sacrifice.
So if you don't participate in this cycle, if you live outside it just for your own sense gratification, you're living in vain, according to the text.
It's quite a strong statement. And this idea of action is so fundamental that even God acts. The text says God acts constantly, even though there's absolutely nothing God needs to gain.
Why? Why does God act then? It's fascinating. The reason given is for setting an example. If God didn't tirelessly engage in action, humanity would follow suit, and it would lead to chaos, confusion, the destruction of worlds. Divine action maintains cosmic order.
So that becomes the model for the wise person. Act without personal attachment, but act for the welfare of the world.
Exactly. Perform your duties not just for yourself, but to set an example, to encourage others. It's a kind of leadership through righteous action.
Which brings us to that critical point about who is really the doer. The text says actions are performed by nature's modes, prakriti. But the egoistic person thinks, I am the doer.
Right. That sense of I am doing this, our individual agency, is often presented as an illusion, rooted in the ego and the influence of these natural forces, the gunas. Someone who understands how these modes work isn't bound by their actions in the same way.
And flowing from that is that incredibly powerful instruction in chapter 3, verse 30. Dedicate all your actions to God. Let go of hope for results. Let go of the feeling of mind. Shake off your mental fever and fight.
Fight, yes, but with complete inner detachment. Detachment from the outcome. Detachment from a sense of being the sole personal agent behind the action.
And achieving that state requires mastering the inner world, right? The text goes back to desire, sitting in the senses, the mind, the intellect, obscuring wisdom.
Yes. Control the senses first, it says, then conquer desire, this great enemy.
And it gives that hierarchy again. Intellect is higher than the mind. The self is higher than the intellect.
So the strategy is use your reason, your intellect, to control the mind, and through that, conquer desire. Inner control is absolutely key for meaningful outer action.
Okay, moving into chapter 4, we get this concept of divine intervention, divine appearances, avatars, basically.
Right. This timeless knowledge, this yoga, Krishna says he originally taught it to the sun god and it was passed down. But over time, it gets lost.
And when righteousness declines, when things go off track.
The divine self embodies forth, manifests.
And the purpose is very explicit, isn't it? Protect the good, destroy the wicked, reestablish righteousness, dharma.
Yes. And here's a really amazing insight in verse 9. Anyone who truly understands the divine nature of these appearances and activities, when they leave their body, they aren't reborn. They attain the divine nature.
Wow. So just knowing the truth about these divine acts becomes a path to liberation.
That's what it suggests. And the text then really elevates knowledge itself. It calls it the highest purifier. Sacrifice done with knowledge is superior to any purely material sacrifice.
But how do you get this knowledge?
From those who have seen the truth. From genuine spiritual teachers. Through humble service, sincere questioning, and study. You have to seek it out.
And the assurance is there. Nothing is as pure as knowledge. And for the karma yogi, the person practicing selfless action, this knowledge will eventually just dawn within them over time through their practice.
It's presented as this powerful tool, almost like a weapon, the sword of wisdom.
Right. This knowledge cuts through doubt, frees you from bondage. Use
Yeah.
this sword, it says, cut the doubt born of ignorance in your heart. Establish yourself in karma yoga and fight. Stand up.
It always comes back to integrating that inner understanding with outer action.
Chapter 5 then gives this incredible picture of the perspective of the truly wise person, the one whose mind is established in unity.
Yes, the idea of seeing equality everywhere. Verse 18 is striking. The wise see a learned scholar, a cow, an elephant, a dog, even an outcast. They see them all with the same eye.
That's radical, especially for an ancient text. Seeing the same divine essence, regardless of the outer form, it cuts through so much potential prejudice.
Because their minds are fixed on that fundamental unity, they've essentially conquered the mortal plane even while living. They are established in the eternal, in Brahman.
And this perspective changes their relationship with happiness and suffering too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Verse 22 is blunt. Worldly pleasures, born from the contact of senses with objects, they are sources of suffering. They begin and they end. They're temporary.
So who is truly happy then, according to the text?
The yogi, it says, who can withstand the urges, lust, anger before leaving the body. That person is established in yoga. That person is happy.
The source of real lasting happiness is internal. The yogi who finds joy within delights in the soul, whose inner light is the divine. The yogi attains the divine state, Brahma Nirvana.
Inner satisfaction, inner peace, that's the ultimate goal, not chasing fleeting external pleasures.
Which naturally leads into chapter 6, digging deeper into how the practice of meditation, mental discipline needed for this inner stability.
Right. A disciplined mind focused completely on the divine, that's the key to freedom from material desires.
And it uses that beautiful image. The steady, focused mind is like a lamp in a windless place. It doesn't flicker.
The process described involves gradually withdrawing the mind step by step, using a firm intellect, a strong resolve to fix it on the self and not think of anything else. It requires persistence.
And again, that perspective of unity comes back for the yogi, seeing God in all beings and all beings in God.
They never lose sight of that divine presence, Krishna says. They see me everywhere and see everything in me. They worship the divine dwelling in all beings through all their actions.
And the highest yogi is the one who sees everyone equally, feeling their joy and sorrow as if it were their own.
Exactly. It's not just an intellectual concept. It's this deep, empathetic connection born from seeing the same self, the same divine spark in everyone.
Okay, but controlling the mind like that,
Yeah.
it sounds incredibly difficult. Arjuna himself says this, right? He calls the mind turbulent, unsteady, powerful, like trying to control the wind.
He does. It's a very relatable struggle. And Krishna agrees, yes, the mind is difficult to control. But he assures Arjuna it can be controlled through consistent practice, abhyasa, and detachment, vairagya.
So it takes work. This yoga is hard for someone whose mind isn't subdued, but for the self-controlled person who really strives, it's attainable. Effort and discipline are crucial.
Absolutely.
So that raises a question. What happens if someone tries? They start on this path, they strive sincerely, but maybe they don't reach perfection in this lifetime. Is all that effort wasted?
That's a great question. And the text gives a really powerful reassurance in chapter 6. Verse 40 says, essentially, no way. There is no destruction, no evil destiny for someone who strives for self-realization. Their efforts are never lost.
So even if they falter, they don't attain the highest state right away.
They are reborn, the text says, perhaps in a home of pure, prosperous people, where they can continue their practice. Or, even better, in a family of wise yogis.
And the crucial insight seems to be that they automatically regain the spiritual intelligence, the consciousness from their previous life's efforts.
Exactly. They're drawn back towards the divine almost automatically by the force of their past habits, their past practice. And the yogi who strives diligently, purified over lifetimes perhaps, eventually attains perfection. That effort is never truly lost. It accumulates.
Which is why this path is presented as so valuable. A yogi, the text says, is greater than mere ascetics, greater than those who just have theoretical knowledge, greater than those who only perform rituals.
It's seen as the most complete path.
Okay, chapter 7 then seems to zero in on knowing the ultimate divine reality itself.
Yes, and it emphasizes how rare this is. Among thousands who strive, perhaps one knows God in reality. It's not easy.
And that very rare soul, maybe after many, many lifetimes, achieves this ultimate realization. All this is God. Vasudeva is everything. That seems to be the pinnacle of wisdom described here.
It is, and the text contrasts this with worshiping other deities for temporary gains, calling that approach perhaps less enlightened, though it acknowledges that ultimately all paths can lead towards the divine.
Why don't more people see this ultimate reality?
The text suggests the ignorant don't grasp God's true, supreme, unchanging nature. They mistakenly think the divine takes on limited forms. And often this is because God's true nature is veiled by divine power, by Yoga Maya.
Interesting. Okay, and then chapter 8 kicks off with Arjuna asking these really fundamental questions, 7 of them.
Right. He asks, what is Brahma? What is Adhyatma? What is Karma? Adiputta? Adidaiva? Adiyajna? And crucially, how are you, God, known at the time of death?
And Krishna gives definitions for each. Brahma is the supreme indestructible reality.
Adhyatma is the individual soul, the self.
Karma is the creative action that brings beings forth.
Ahibhuta is the perishable material world.
Adhidaiva is the universal divine form, the cosmic Purusa.
And Adiyajna is God as the inner witness, the recipient of sacrifice, right within the body.
Okay, lots to unpack there. But maybe the most vital takeaway from this section, especially connecting back to the soul's journey, is about the time of death.
Absolutely. Verse 5 is pivotal. Whatever state of being one remembers when leaving the body, that state one will attain without fail.
So your consciousness, your focus at the very moment of death is paramount. It determines your next existence.
That's the teaching here. It brings everything together, the nature of the self, the importance of practice, controlling the mind, focusing on the divine. It all culminates in that final moment.
Wow. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What does this deep dive into these first maybe 8 chapters of the Gita mean for you listening? We started with this intense, very human crisis, a warrior, paralyzed by grief and confusion.
And from that starting point, these incredibly profound philosophical and spiritual insights unfolded. We touched on the eternal nature of the soul, the real meaning of duty, this revolutionary idea of selfless action, acting without attachment to results.
The critical importance of mastering your own mind and senses, and this understanding that there are different paths, like knowledge and action, leading towards realizing the divine, both within you and everywhere around you.
We've seen how this ancient text tackles these fundamental human dilemmas head-on, and it offers perspectives that can really shift how we see the world, our place in it, our actions, our inner lives, whether we're facing, a battlefield or just the challenges of daily life.
These excerpts you provided, they really offer a remarkably rich starting point for grappling with these complex, timeless ideas. It's a framework for living an active life with spiritual depth.
It truly is.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to maybe mull over based on everything we've discussed. If, as the text suggests, the ultimate goal is to remember the divine at the time of death, and your consciousness at that final moment is heavily influenced by how you focused your mind throughout your life, how might consciously bringing awareness of the divine or your truest eternal self into your actions right now, today, in your everyday life, how might that fundamentally change the quality of your present experience? Something to think about.